Before I jump into the details of the illusion of free will, I'd like to start off by telling you about an experiment. Since I'm a scientist and an engineer, I just love when academia proves through scientific experiments the message of non-duality. And in 2009, the University of Houston conducted an experiment and with 100% predictability determined that all decisions are made anywhere from 6 to 8 seconds before the ego gets a hold of it and says that it did that decision or it made that decision. And what happens is in the back of the brain, there's like two states. There's a state of not knowing, and then there's a state of knowing. And in between these two is known as a quantum leap. So there's a time when we don't know the answer to something, and then all of a sudden we know the answer to it. But scientists cannot determine what happens in that jump. It's a mystery. It's unknowable. It's unmeasurable, yet something is happening within that space. And that's what non-duality is pointing to, is that we, who we take ourselves to be an ego in doing this life, do not make our decisions. And that's where it gets really perplexing, because it sure does seem like we do. You know, an ego superimposes itself onto reality, and then it says, I did reality. And it does seem like that happens, but nobody can find that. And when you go and look for it yourself, you realize that this just isn't the case. So it does appear that we have free will, that there's somebody here, there's an entity here that's making all of these decisions. But again, it's only apparent because the ego itself is only apparent. It's a false reality. It's an illusion. So how can illusion make a decision? It can't. It just seems like that. And what happens is when you turn within and this ego starts to collapse, you realize that in the collapse of ego, you come in line with reality. This so-called 6 to 8 seconds starts to dwindle down to nothing, and you actually become in line with the quantum leap. You are the quantum leap. It sounds amazing, doesn't it? I mean, when in line with the quantum leap, then everything is just coming through you unobstructed. And when that happens, life just flows better. It's just easier when you're aligned with reality. But apparently this ego thinks it's doing everything. And if we think about it, we know that to turn within, it's the ego turning within. So the ego does have free will, apparently, to not turn within and to look outwards, or to turn within. And in this so-called free will to turn within, it realizes, as it rests in its own self, that because it is an illusion, therefore free will is also an illusion. Ramana Maharshi has this simple quote that sums it all up. He says, the ego is the presupposing of a non-existent entity trying to get salvation for itself. So again, this is the ego. The ego only exists by presupposing on itself onto reality So to give itself an apparent existence, and it does that to stay in existence, because as ego diminishes through self-inquiry and you come in line with reality, there is no more substance, so to speak, for the ego to grab a hold of and say that it owns this substance of reality. And when you see this for what it is, of course it's perplexing. Of course it's a head scratcher. And it's just this realm of awe that remains as you just let life come through you unobstructed. I hope this helps you understand how we only have apparent free will. And with that apparent free will, we can collapse the mechanism, the egoic mechanism that creates the illusion of free will, and come in line with the one reality of ourself. Take care.